My name is Machelle Wood. I'm the Education and Special Events Coordinator here at the McGoffin Home State Historic Site. And I was born in Fort Sill, Oklahoma, and moved to different places, but arrived in El Paso in 1980. And I was about 9.5 years old when I first moved here. So I've been living in El Paso for the most part, 39 years. And of course I was a child, so I really didn't have a lot of choice of where I moved to. It was, of course, with my family, but my father came here with a business opportunity. He moved here for work. And one of the things I remember most about growing up in El Paso was it was a entirely different type of cuisine here. I remember growing up and being used to a lot of like hamburgers and hot dogs, and that was kind of a go-to food, a quick food. Mac and cheese. And then when I moved here, very quickly, even though my family, were not Hispanic, very quickly, my mother adopted a lot of the cuisine from El Paso. So we started to see things like refried beans, and we started seeing one of her favorite quick fixes, which really isn't of Mexican origin, but something she would fix really quickly was nachos. But if she took a little bit more time, she would make chilaquiles, and she would make all sorts of, tacos, and we would have a variety of dishes that we weren't exposed to until we moved to El Paso. So the cuisine of El Paso quickly became our cuisine. And in fact, for about 10 years, I spent traveling out of town. I lived out of a suitcase for about 10 years doing historic restoration in buildings all over the country. And one of the things that I ended up doing, we would call it the Great Taco Tour. I would go and hunt Mexican restaurants wherever we went. And that included places like Arkansas, Nebraska, of course, ended up in California a lot. There were a lot more options in California and Arizona. But places like Pennsylvania, really kind of far away from home, and go hunt out the cuisine that to me was home. And I'll be honest, even in places like San Antonio, which you would think would be so much closer, in Arizona and California, none of it quite matched El Paso's food. Came close. Actually, one of the closest places, and this was a shock, was out in the middle of nowhere. Fields, like, I don't even know what crops they were growing, but it was some sort of field where they were growing things. But in the middle of this, there was almost like a bodega, and they had a restaurant inside of it. And it was some of the best Mexican food I had found anywhere else in the country. Completely shocked. But after that day, when we first discovered that, I ended up going there every day while I was there working because the food was just so good, and with that food was just tied in all the wonderful warm feelings of home. Plus, there were people in there speaking Spanish, which was what I was used to at home. Everything just kind of embodied that feeling of being home here in El Paso.
What was this?
This was, I cannot remember the name of the restaurant. I wish I could. It was just literally, it's out near Hot Springs, Arkansas, out in the mountains. And, it's actually surrounded by mountains. And I was there working on a bathhouse. They had a historic row of bathhouses because they have natural mineral springs, hot springs, hence the name, that run through the city. And so they back in the turn of the century, they built these bathhouses because there was the belief that they had healing properties. You could go and bathe in the waters if you had, sore muscles or injuries, and it would help the healing process. And just out in the middle of nowhere is this beautiful little Mexican restaurant that was just amazing. And they had like all the like bimbos, like type, you know, the fast foods and all the sodas you would expect to see. It was pretty cool. So my personal interest in food, honestly, is just, again, that tie here to home. It very quickly became home to me. And so, you know, working here at the McGoffin Home State Historic Site, you know, we made a very purposeful decision to call it the McGoffin Home. People say McGoffin House, but a house is kind of cold and clinical and just an architectural structure. But home implies, you know, someone living there and cooking and cleaning and doing all the things that we do in our homes. So the really talking about the types of foods that the McGoffins would have eaten during their time here in the home really kind of ties into that connection, because the biggest thing that we try to do in museums is really try to bring home the connection between people now and people of the past, to make these people real. It's very hard when you're reading words on a page to get that sense that these were real, living, breathing people. But if you can show what kind of food they ate, how they got their food, you know, what connection they had to food, that suddenly makes them living, breathing people. The hands-on food classes was kind of a no-brainer for that connection, because it makes it even more visceral. Just telling people about the food was pretty cool. You could see people's faces light up, but not everyone was so excited by just hearing about that. So at the state level, because we are a state historic site, at the state level, a lot of the educators, including myself, we had talked about ways to bring food into our museums. And we talked about a food waste program. And just even starting with the basic concept of, okay, what kind of food would they have eaten? How would they have purchased things they purchased? How would they have produced things that they produced in home? And just making that connection first. And then once we had that, maybe looking at an actual cooking class. Well, we got very lucky. In the research process for that, we found out that El Paso had a cookbook that a bunch of women had gathered recipes from women within the community, and they published it as a fundraiser for the YMCA here in El Paso. Actually, it was the first cookbook fundraiser for a YMCA in the United States. So in my research to discover how the McGoffins would have eaten, where they would have purchased their food, all of that, I stumbled across a cookbook that was published in El Paso. The women of the community got together and they collected recipes, and then they put them together and published them in a cookbook that, you know, was just this wonderful collection of what people actually ate from that time period. And it was a fundraiser, a cookbook fundraiser they did, the Ladies Auxiliary, for the YMCA here in El Paso. And come to find out, it was the first cookbook fundraiser for a YMCA in the United States. Another thing I found out in my research was there's a section of the cookbook. It's called the Mexican Department. And it's actually a collection, quite a few recipes. Actually, it goes all the way to there. And it's all these recipes that, you know, very common ones, like there's chili sauce. There is, of course, stuffed peppers, marronas, chile con huevo, let's see, enchiladas, albóndigas. Actually, the albóndigas recipe was a recipe submitted by Joseph's wife, Octavia. Now, Octavia was Irish American, and she had married an Irish, Spanish, Mexican American, and he grew up in Chihuahua, Mexico. He was born there and grew up there until the age of 8. So, of course, he would have been very well versed in Mexican cuisine. So apparently she ended up just like my family. She adopted the recipes, and that was the first recipe we did in the cooking class, was the albóndigas. And I will tell you, we had a lot of people show up for that first time. You know, this was kind of our first venture into this. I really, you know, without a full working kitchen, I had to very quickly figure out how we were going to prepare this, how we were going to be able to make it hands-on for everyone and yet keep it safe at the same time, because we were going to be working with raw meat and everything else. And we found a way to make it happen. And so many people showed up, and they were so excited. And the people that were just coming in for tours kept remarking about the smell. And they kept begging for bowls of the albóndigas. And we unfortunately had to tell them, no, you know, that's for the people in the class. But it kind of, you know, throughout the day, just because of the smell of it here in the building, people were drawn to it. And so lots and lots of people came back for the next month's class and the next month's class. And it ended up just being this incredible connection, so immediate, something just so quick that people were like, wow, that's amazing. Oh gosh, you know, they're making fruitcake at Christmas time. Oh, I want to know what their fruitcake tastes like in 1898. How did they make it? How different is it from now? And so it was really satisfying, this curiosity of how much food has changed. And it has deepened the connection with the community here. Yeah, I think the classes have taken, you know, when we hear the word museum, most people have this concept that it's kind of this dusty, cold, kind of clinical, lifeless place. But just by introducing food into the equation, very quickly people stopped seeing it that way. And they were suddenly seeing this as something that connected to their daily lives, because we all need to eat to live. Of course, it's even better when the food is really tasty, and it fills not just our stomachs, but our souls. Sorry. It was very instant connection. It just had to my mom.
Food does that. You better stop. That's recording, but this is not, so let's record here. And we are recording.
Okay. So, with the cookbook, you know, we have this event coming up. It's the Texas Association of Texas Association of Museums. We have an annual meeting, and this year it just happens to be here in El Paso. And we wanted to host opening night here at the McGoffin home, and to do so, of course, you're expected to provide food, right? And you're usually, having been to a few of these, usually the food is usually indicative of wherever the host city is, but we were lucky because, again, we had this cookbook that was representative of El Paso's history, and we're a history museum. And so, having worked with the El Paso Independent School District, we go to like quarterly meetings with teachers where teachers talk about the different programs they're offering for their students, and just happened to witness this one with Chef Puga, who is in charge of the Bowie Culinary Arts Program. And he was speaking about all the awards that he had already achieved with the program, but just where he was going to take it with the next step. And that they were now capable of catering up to 300 people, which phenomenal, right? So I approached him after the meeting and I said, hey, look, we are going to be hosting a Texas Association of Museums conference here in El Paso, and the McGoffin Home wants to do something, but we need catering. Would you be available? He said yes. So we exchanged information, and then we ended up getting together, and I said, look, you know, I didn't get to mention this to you, but we have a cookbook that was produced here in El Paso in 1898. And immediately his eyes lit up and he said, oh, I've got to see that. So I went and I grabbed him a copy and gave it to him. And I said, look, you know, hang on to this. And so he went through it and he said, I'm already seeing recipes that we can use. These would be perfect. So he is doing this for us here April 2nd, 2019. And he's picking recipes from the cookbook to serve. And one of the ones that he absolutely just had to do was the albondigas recipe. So we're going to have little cups because, of course, these, you know, it's kind of walking around and talking during this conference and stuff. So the food, you have to serve it in ways that are very portable, very manageable when you're standing and moving. So yeah, he's going to be doing little cups of albondigas to serve. Which is just absolutely beautiful and comes full circle from my first class here. So yeah, the connections that we have found in the greater community here in El Paso, those who are directly tied into culinary arts, but also just the community in general through the food is amazing. And for us, you know, we look at this TAM event as being able to showcase El Paso, because again, going back to my travels and looking at these restaurants all across the country trying to find food like home, I think people got really tired of me just saying, you know, this isn't the food I'm used to, this isn't like home, this is very different, this doesn't seem real to me. People got very tired of that, and I don't think they quite understood what I was saying. But this is an opportunity for us as El Pasoans to show them what we mean when we say, this isn't the food I'm used to. This isn't the food my mom made. This isn't the food my grandmother made. This isn't the food that I grew up with. We'll get to show them the food we did grow up with.
Mm-hmm. Is there any other final thoughts?
You know, yeah. So, probably the reason, the deepest connection, and this is why I'm starting to cry, the deepest connection that I found through all this. I just lost my mother a few years ago. And my mother was an amazing chef. She was fabulous. And I remember arguing with her and telling her that food isn't love. Because, oh my gosh, she would produce the biggest amounts of food, and she would, of course, I mean, she could feed an army. And of course it was all amazing. And, you know, when you grow up and you're struggling with your weight, or you don't feel, you know, very comfortable in your own body, it's very easy to blame someone pushing off delicious food in front of you. And so, you know, I remember the last few years I kept telling her, look, Mom, food's not love. I've since discovered it is. Just probably not the way I was thinking of it before. It wasn't the quantity, but it was the love and care that she gave to it. And you don't realize just how important it is until it's not around anymore. So food is so much more important than just, you know, education. It's so much more important than the temperature you're setting your oven at, or, you know, where you're getting your ingredients, how you're getting your ingredients. It really is just this connection of sharing with another person or even just yourself, even if you're just cooking for yourself, taking that time to prepare something that is just right, that just hits you not in your stomach but in the feels. When you achieve that, that really is love.
Thank you.